given the Zoom meeting, call it to order, right? I didn't feel that reviewing minutes from our last meeting.
This
is a special meeting
for the Wild Ridge.
Okay. Well, then we'll fire on off through that. I believe Mr. Garrett provided us a special called meeting agenda, and it leads off with introduction of new members. We should probably take a roll call of everyone present first, right?
Right.
Okay. What poor unfortunate soul is tasked with that this evening?
Say that again.
It's going to be Sam or Ethan. One of y'all.
You're breaking up a little bit.
Oh, is the audio bad?
Yeah, it's like a reverb.
All right. Well, we need a roll call of who all is present to fire the meeting off.
Jamie.
Present.
Charlie.
Present.
Marcy.
Present.
Ryan.
Present.
Jason.
I'm here.
Eddie. And Mike. And Susanna.
Here.
That may be Eddie's cell phone you have in the waiting room because he's texting me trying to figure out how to get in.
Okay. I can admit him, and if it's not, we can remove.
Let's kick him back out. Can you unmute that number?
Yeah, that's him. 4936.
That's me.
Okay. Sorry about that, Eddie. I didn't recognize the number.
Oh, it's fine. No worries. How are you guys?
Good.
Doing well.
All right.
Sorry,
then.
I'm driving.
No, that's good. So did we make it through everybody? Got a nice list there?
Yep.
Okay. So on to introductions. So the council is reorganized. We have our fine mayor-elect, Charlie, and Susanna has remained on the planning commission. We're happy to have them. And then we have Marcia Cooper. Are you Marcia or Marcia?
I go by Marcy.
Marcy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we also have Mr. Ryan Slattery. Marcy, do you want to fire off with a quick hello and a background and your interest in participating?
Sure. Again, I'm Marcy Cooper. I've lived on the mountains since the mid-'80s. We live over in Hidden Brook. I was a long-time TVA, worked in the power generation side of the business, and I'm an engineer by training, did a whole lot of things in the generation side. Retired from TVA about 10 years ago and have been doing contract and consulting work around the country and in Canada off and on over the years. But I'm not traveling as much anymore. And my husband and I are both retired. And so I've got a little bit more time to give. And I've got a lot of interest in the Signal Mountain community. So it looked like a good opportunity. Again, with my engineering background, and I've done an awful lot of construction and major project work, it looked like it might be a really good fit here. So I'm looking forward.
We're going to have engineer and contractor takeover of this commission before it's over with.
That's okay.
Well, welcome. Thank you so much for being willing to do this volunteer role. Mr. Slattery, we're anxious to hear about all your international credentials.
Well, good evening. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be part of this planning commission. I live in Dogwood Grove, subdivision right across from Nolan Elementary. My wife and I moved here from South Carolina. I also lived in Michigan before that, graduated from Michigan State University. with a bachelor's in civil engineering. That's my past has been commercial development on many different sides of the, from a municipality standpoint. Served as a reviewer early in my career. Currently, I'm a commercial developer for Hutton. We do shopping centers throughout the Southeast. Also working on single tenants up in the Northeast as well. So I'm happy to be here. I'm familiar with lots of ordinances and hope I can bring some insight and help this commission and council.
Well, I won't take offense to that. I'm sure we could probably use some help. We got to leave some room open for improvements all the time, right? Very good. Well, I think, well, I guess we potentially might be able to move to this reasonably quickly. The topic at hand, Boyd, would you be the best to give the rundown on the history and what the questions are?
Sam, as I'm doing that, if you want to go ahead and bring Jack and Julie in.
Sure.
Well,
There. I'm sorry. Never mind. Jack had dropped off for a minute. Here they come.
Okay. Wild Ridge Subdivisions Plan Unit Development was approved back in around 13. It was approved as a phased development. Originally, the outline plan that was approved contained a development schedule, and it was listed as part of that plan and therefore considered to be binding. They began with phases 1 and 2, which they completed in terms of infrastructure and everything, and have since been building out and selling those properties. Recently, they contacted us and wanted to begin phase 4. When this all happened initially, it was right before I became town manager. It was right before the development district began providing planning services for us. So we had to kind of go back and get up to speed on exactly how that process worked and what we might need to do. In doing that, realized that development schedule existed and had not been met, and accordingly, this would need to come back to Planning Commission to consider options in that regard, whether it be extended, modified, or even removed. There is an option for revoking zoning that was provided in this process. However, that does not apply here because there's been no zoning change. So we began that process, and in an attempt to expedite that, push the meeting back from its normal time to now to schedule a special public hearing on it. After that, Julie Beach, who is joining us, actually provided some information. Was an article on a planning commission meeting also back in 2013, which kind of sent us down another path. And we learned that subsequent to all the approvals, the planning commission, on request of the developer, made a recommendation to town council that they allow, let me see if I can find it. The motion read to recommend to the town council that changes to the phasing and the construction schedule be allowed to be made administratively by the town manager and his or her staff, including an extension of that construction schedule not to exceed the year 2040. So we did find that. However, we did not find where that was ever acted upon by town council. Had that been acted upon and approved, none of this process would be necessary, but that apparently did not happen. So that's what brings us here. The developer's request is that the development schedule be removed from the outline plan. So that is what is for consideration. As part of this process, this is required to be a public hearing, and we do have one person who has asked to speak.
And bring her in at this time.
That's Jamie's call as to when he wants to do that.
Just let me know.
Yeah, I was going to ask a few questions, and then I know that Ryan had submitted a few, and Marcy as well. Charlie, do you remember? So that statement was extending to 2040 and allowing administrative scheduling changes. Was that expressly for this development, or did we want to change that just in general, that development schedules could be changed administratively?
I don't really remember that, but looking at the meeting minutes, it looked like maybe Jack had made that request because, and I do remember thinking back on it, and Jack, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you told us this was going to take a long time to play out, and maybe you have requested that we don't have those shorter time frames, and you wanted a longer time frame. Is that why we did that? Do you remember?
I would say, yeah. It's hard to get one started, and we didn't know how long it was going to take to kind of get the traction. And I think that the Planning Commission was looking for some general guidance of what to expect. And Charlie, my memory at the time was we all pretty much knew it was kind of a shot in the dark because it was an estimated business plan. And I don't think that we or you or anyone else knew exactly what the absorption rate on homes would be. So I think you and I are kind of on the same page in our memory of what led to it.
Yeah, I don't recall that we intended to make a blanket change to the zoning, but just a specific one to this zoning issue, or this plan unit development issue. Am I the only one that was on the Planning Commission back at that time? Was Jason, were you on it then? And joined.
The only familiar face to me, aside from Boyd.
Okay. Well, maybe whoever's calling in was involved and watched it and may have some information too.
No, not me, Charlie.
Oh no, I wasn't talking about you, Eddie. I think somebody else is going to call. Is waiting to speak.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the recommendation was definitely in response to requests from the developer. I think it was a realization fairly early on that a tight constraint to a schedule like that could be problematic, and felt that while they wanted to retain it, that they needed to have some reasonable flexibility and allow staff to deal with it.
Boyd, a question I asked you earlier this afternoon, with respect to the schedule itself, it's a requirement for the application right now. That's correct, that it be included in that request, in the PUD request?
Yeah, during the approval process, that development schedule, I believe, is required, but I don't know that it is required to be included in I guess the best way to put it is I don't know that it's required to be binding as part of the approval. In this case, it was, but then shortly thereafter, the Planning Commission recommended that basically be changed.
So in other words, if someone else has development plans that come up that are multi-phased, as part of the application, they are going to submit a schedule, a phase schedule, and that is going to be presented to council for final approval and part of their approval, or it is not.
It is part of what will be considered. Whether or not, I don't know that it has to be binding in terms of being approved as part of the outline plan.
The reason why I asked that is that, you know, either it's an obligation and we're waiving it for this developer, or we go back to the motion in 2013 and change it to administrative in the future. You know, that way you're not changing the precedence of who comes after this. If someone gets approved after this, that would be my concern with just getting rid of the schedule altogether. You're doing something different for somebody versus another in the future.
In the, I believe it's subdivision regs, in regards to the plan unit development, the section that specifically pertains to this process provides one of the options as being removal of the schedule. So it's not creating a new scenario or creating precedent. It would be just exercising that particular option that is provided as an option in the regs.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Farmer, will you entertain discussion to consider overall ordinance modification moving forward, or do we want to address specifically the question that we have as it refers to this development? Because it seems like the question is based on the ordinance. Can we, it states approval of any time extension discretion of the PC not to extend 2 years without reapproval by town council further on for outline plans when you have schedules in them. Do we want to work on changing that language to adopt the 2013 PC's language? And the reason I'm directing this is Jason, because he'll keep me confined here. Do we want to change that language such that administration can adopt these changes and move them along? I don't think getting rid of a schedule is the best idea, because, you know, if significant changes were to happen, it would be the PC's responsibility to review it at that time. We're talking about 2040. That's, you know, 2 decades from now.
Well, I think we're talking about two different things. So one is the case tonight, and I think we ought to probably hear from the opposition and act on the case tonight. And the second thing is what you just described would be changing the subregs. And if that's the case, we probably do need to put a little bit more time into it, and then come up with a subreg change that we agree with, and then present it to council. This is a very, in lots of municipalities, this is a staff level issue. So I think we would be making a really good decision in the future to make this a staff level issue. This is a very minor thing.
All right. So sequence of events, would it make sense now to, I guess, give any other commission member an opportunity to ask questions, allow the developer to state their case. Then we'll need the public's participation. Then we can debate and vote.
I think that we don't need to go beyond just this particular issue with this particular developer tonight.
Okay. Does anyone have any other questions?
I agree with that.
Point to discuss?
No, Jamie, I just said, this is Eddie. I just said I agree with that. Let's stay focused on this specific task at hand.
I do have a question. If I understand this correctly, it was approved with a pretty detailed schedule. There were a lot of unknowns or uncertainties at the time, so it seems logical that, you know, whatever schedule was put in place at that time might likely need to change or be adjusted over time. I tend to agree with what's been discussed, that going to a no schedule seems like a big jump if it's as far out as 2040, but maybe there's something in between where it's as maybe perhaps as proposed, it's administratively, any changes are administratively made, or there's only a periodic update of the schedule. So, you know, you had this original schedule in 13. You've now determined that the original schedule is not logical and doesn't make sense. This is what the current schedule is forecast to be, and periodically come back to the Planning Commission or at the administrative level. I guess it needs some discussion, that periodically just provide a new projection and update, and just have that sanity check that this new schedule, whatever it is, doesn't now conflict with anything else going on in the community. So again, I'm just kind of thinking as I listen to all this, maybe there's a midpoint, you know, between no schedule at all and something that's overly prescriptive, that gets us to a reasonable kind of area that the appropriate levels can at least do a sanity check if the schedules change appreciably.
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think we need to remember that, you know, this is a PUD. This is a planned unit development, and there is a certain set of rules based on building a planned unit development that Mr. Cruzy has presented and passed, and those rules are much more specific in deviations than he can have from his PUD. And if he has a major deviation, he has to come back in front of the Planning Commission. He has to come back in front of the Town Council. If he has a minor deviation, he can come back in front of staff. The only thing we're talking about here is a construction and development schedule that, quite frankly, is market driven, not Planning Commission or Town Council driven. In my viewpoint, this is a very kind of minor thing that should be quickly handled by the Planning Commission if this is the stop.
Very good. Thank you for that contribution. Would it be appropriate to allow Julie and Jack to speak on what their intentions are tonight, and we can move on?
In the interest of time, should we just hear from opposition first and then?
Right, because nothing's materially changed.
Yeah, that's perfectly fine. If we're ready to listen to the public, that's great.
I will bring in Ann Haygood at this time, and just to clarify, I don't know what her position is, so but I'll bring her in at this time.
Hello, good evening, Ms. Haygood. We're pleased that you've elected to participate in the hearing tonight and are anxious to hear your comments on the subject. You have the floor.
I think she still may be joining. I apologize. It always takes just a minute. Ms. Haygood, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, good evening, Ms. Haygood. We're pleased that you've
If you wouldn't mind muting your YouTube
in the hearing tonight and are anxious to hear your comments on the subject. You have the floor.
Thank you.
Still may be joining. I apologize. It always takes just a minute. Ms. Haygood, if you have the YouTube feed on, do you mind muting that? Yes, ma'am.
Just a moment.
To avoid the feedback.
How's that?
Much better. Thank you.
Take care of it. Thank you for hearing me. I'm speaking only as a resident, a participant in the community, someone who loves the beautiful environment that we have here. I
can't speak officially as a member of the tree board, but I am a member of the tree board, so I'm always interested in how our trees are being handled. I just wanted to say that everything I have seen at Wild Ridge, the great thoughtfulness that has gone into all of the design of both the housing and the infrastructure, show a great preservation for a respect for the preservation of nature and our mountain woodlands. The subdivision seems to meet the needs not only of our environment, but of course also the market of what kinds of things people want. The developer is also known for his appreciation of our natural and historical resources and for his willingness to put his money where his mouth is. I would just love to see this kind of development encouraged and allowed to flourish, and hope that you would require these same standards of everyone else that builds up here. Thanks very much, and thank you, Jack Cruzy.
And if you don't mind, would you give your address so we'll have it in the record?
Yes, sorry about that. Ann Haygood, 506 James Boulevard.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, certainly if the developer would like to speak, we want to hear him. But I've made my case on this. I would make a motion to approve the applicant's request.
Your motion is to eliminate the development schedule and not require an update.
My motion, yes, is to approve the applicant's request.
Jason, this is Eddie. Do you want to put any type of administrative stipulations that moving forward, this may be a staff decision versus moving to a PC?
I would recommend that we do that. I would add the caveat to this motion. I'd recommend that you do have that at the administrative level. The reason being, 2007, you did have bonds being called. If you don't have a schedule, you never have the enforceability of calling a bond to finish an improvement or restore an improvement. I would leave that at
the developer would be providing any bonding. This is not a town bonding issue. If there's bonding, the developer would be providing that. I would be happy that we could to adjust my motion that any development schedules can be handled at the staff approval level.
Yeah, that would be the only conflict. Your motion, while not seconded, was appended to include administrative review, and I believe the developer's request is to eliminate the schedule. So I don't know what administration would review. So to be clear, we'll step back, let's get a motion, let's get it seconded, then we'll discuss it. I believe
I'll second the motion as stated to remove the timeline with the progress from Mr. Cruzy's development. It's obvious that he's going to finish this long before 40.
Okay. So we have a motion and we have a second to remove the schedule altogether. Ryan, you had mentioned that perhaps you'd like to retain a schedule and have it administratively reviewable and extended in the future.
Yes. This developer is a class act. I've called around, I've asked about it. They perform. That's not the question here. The question is, treating the same developments with the same intensity in a planned development. And that's all I would say is that, there should be an administrative schedule, and that could be 2040 that this gets completed. But they are starting a new improvement, and if something happens with the market or whatever, and they don't complete it, there's no schedule associated with the town to come back in and call those bonds. That's my point.
Not sure why we don't reinstate the same motion we had back when this was initially approved back in 2013.
I would agree with that.
Okay, so Mr. Farmer, then are you rescinding your motion or modifying it to match?
I'll amend it. I want to be, maybe we want to hear from Mr. Cruzy. I want to make them happy I would be happy to amend my motion to the original 2013 motion.
I'd second that.
Okay, is there
Could
any
you-
other discussion?
Yeah, okay, let me make sure I understand. What is the motion that's on the table now?
Yeah, maybe Boyd should put that back up as a display or whatever you share that same
I can bring that back up for you.
motion.
Jack, are you okay with that?
Yeah, I think the reason that, we talked about it in 13 is probably why we're talking about it again tonight. And I've listened intently, and I appreciate some of the kind comments that have been made. But I think the 2040 was to make sure that there was a back into it. And it was kind of like, we don't want to approve this PUD in institutional memory. There were not a lot of PUDs done at that time, or certainly in Signal Mountain. And I think the 2040 was the back end. And we always looked at in our interactions with the Planning Commission and the Town Council that this request for development schedule was an estimated business plan and not necessarily a binding, if someone doesn't buy the house, it's hard to go out and put another road in. That doesn't serve the interest of the town or the business or the community. So I think we've sort of kind of bumped into a situation now. You mentioned the bond. A year ago, we got a reclamation bond, and it's expired since renewed because we've tried to work our way forward in a very challenging business environment. And I think the question, if I may, is, I live here, I'm not going anywhere. Thank you for your comments. Believe in the community, believe in Signal Mountain. We'll do whatever works for you and is in keeping with what is easiest for you. We have worked closely with the staff in the past. We're very positive about those interactions. Would love to work with them in the future because it should free up people with other things to look at from a higher 30 or 40, 50,000 foot point of view. And I think the staff you've got, if there's the problem in terms of not developing or anything like that, they serve the town well, very professional. And the last thing I'll say in closing, the plan that was approved after about 3 years of meetings has not varied at all with where we are today, except for timing. Nothing else has changed. Not the roads, not the curves, not the asphalt, nothing. Everything is identical to what was originally approved. The only thing we're asking is that it be dropped so we don't keep bumping into time frames on basically a business plan. So we're in your hands. We'd like to get started though. We very much would like to get started.
Would Ryan, given Mr. Cruz's request, would there be a reason then to consider removing the schedule altogether such that administration doesn't have to review? Or I think I hear you guys would probably feel safer at this point, kind of having some little review, some little check as it progresses, at least they were on a staff level.
I'd like to make a comment, and I'm the only one, I guess, that was on the Planning Commission then, and I remember fondly, Jack, coming because you came back time and again because we would ask you for one little modification, and you made it every time, and you certainly were the easiest developer that I can recall in my time dealing with, and the most responsible. But I think what Ryan's point is, and I agree with it, is that if you take it away for this person who is by all means a great developer and doing a wonderful job, you're setting a precedent for the next person who might not be so great. And I think that having something in there is better than nothing. And right now it's extended to 2040, which is 19 years from now. And hopefully, I know you've completed some of the project, and hopefully, and that's within 6 years, and hopefully within 19 years, you'll have the opportunity to complete the rest. But I think you also can come back to the town council and just administratively ask them to alter that schedule. So I kind of think having some time frame in there is better.
I very much concur with what you just stated, Charlie, and for a lot of the very same reasons that in this case, you've got a good development, you've got everything happening the way you want, but it's a reasonable kind of process backstop that you would have in place for somebody who was an unknown commodity. And it doesn't seem to be particularly onerous. So I can support the same thing, that the original I guess it's 2013 proposal seems to be a reasonable balance of all considerations.
I agree. I think having a guardrail, and
Yeah.
keeping it an administrative approval process simplifies it, but still gives you that guardrail.
May I say something? May I? Yeah.
Certainly.
I think we felt after the planning commission was going to pass to the town council that this be handled administratively. If there was a failure to follow up or execute, it would be on our part, simply because we assumed that that would be done. And we didn't feel that that was a battle that we necessarily should be involved in. If the planning commission wanted it to be handled that way at that time, that planning commission. I think what we would like to do is, what we'd like to come out of with tonight is a recommendation that wherever we go, we can get to work. We've got subcontractors lined up. It's a good market. We don't want to lose a lot more time because there are so many big situations going on the national scene. But I also hear what you're saying, and I just want to say that knowing now that it wasn't passed to the town council, we are more than willing to work with the planning commission and or the town council, and certainly the staff, with whatever guidelines you impose. And one of you mentioned guardrails. If you want to come back and have an annual update, that's very easy for us to do. What tripped us up here is we assumed it had been done, and that's our mistake. But if you come back and say, we want this schedule updated annually, or we want this schedule updated every 2 years, that's very easy for us to do because we're on top of our business. The 2040 was a backstop, and by the way, if we don't develop it until 2040, I'll be 94. So I really hope we get done before then. We'd like to get started. That's job number one. But we are very open to. We've worked together this long. We're going to continue. You tell us when you want updates, and we'll be very, very happy to provide you with the progress up to that point and what we see when we look at the crystal ball. That's a very reasonable request.
Boyd, is this just a planning commission issue?
What you do tonight will be a recommendation to council, and we have another hearing and everything scheduled for next Monday with council, so that we can theoretically address this as quickly as possible. But you will be, whatever action you take will be in the form of a recommendation to council.
Well, I think we've heard from everyone, and it seems like generally we're all in agreement. We have a motion and a second to adopt the 2013 recommendation to council. We won't add any additional language, but we will want to make sure that Monday that this is presented and heard. Is there any other discussion, or are we prepared to vote?
If call for the question.
Okay. Well, then we'll be taking a roll call vote, and I don't guess we restate. It said to recommend to the town council that changes to phasing and construction schedule be allowed to be made administratively by the town manager and his or her staff, including an extension of that construction schedule not to exceed the year 2040. All those in favor, we want to do a roll call?
I think we're supposed to do a roll call.
Yep.
Yeah.
Jamie,
Aye.
Charlie,
Yes.
Jason,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Susanna,
Yes.
Eddie.
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
Passes unanimously, right?
Yes.
All right. I had a text that there was something procedural. If you called the question, you're supposed to vote on the call first. I don't know what that means. Mr. Cash, did we do anything procedurally incorrectly there?
Well, I guess the point is technically, since I guess Jason, somebody called for the question. Under Robert's rules, you are supposed to vote on whether to vote. I think
Oh,
that's
great. Thanks a lot, Jason.
I
I
think we passed it.
I think we're okay.
I think you're
Is that good?
I think you're fine.
Okay. Just remember what each person said in case someone calls in a question. We have to meet on it and discuss again.
And it was unanimous.
All right. Very good. Thank you
Jamie?
so much for participating. Are there any other items to discuss tonight? Oh, Boyd is raising his hand.
Yes, there is one other related item that if we could address tonight would certainly help Mr. Cruzy and us in terms of timing. One of the things that they will do was mentioned when they begin infrastructure, they will have to file a reclamation bond. And I'm not really sure, frankly, why Planning Commission has to accept it, because it is outlined very well as to how it's supposed to work. The amount of the reclamation bond is to be 125% of the estimated cost to basically stabilize any disturbed area. In the past, I've done that by asking the developer to get a quote from a contractor, and then getting the bond in whatever form the developer chooses for 125% of that. The original 2 phases, the performance bond was set at just over 19,000, maybe 19,500, something like that. In this case, the estimate and everything will result in a reclamation bond of 14,781. I have noticed from a bank that they will be issuing an irrevocable letter of credit for that amount, which will automatically renew until released by the town. So everything is in place, but there is one provision that says that reclamation bond also has to be accepted by Planning Commission. So I would ask that someone make a motion to accept that reclamation bond in that amount, subject to the town attorney approving documentation.
Move to approve.
Second.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Okay, hearing none, I guess we'll move to, now, do we have to vote to vote?
Not this time.
Not this time. Fantastic. Then if we're prepared to vote, all those in favor?
It will need to be a roll call.
Jamie,
Yes.
Susanna,
Yes.
Eddie,
Yes.
Marcy,
Yes.
Ryan,
Yes.
Charlie,
Yes.
Jason.
Yes.
I'm also a yes.
All right.
Thank you. That's all I
Acceptance
have.
of the required bond is approved. Can we do anything else for you fine folks of Signal Mountain this evening?
Not for us. We appreciate it. Like I say, we've enjoyed working with you, and we continue to enjoy it. We'll continue to try to live up to some very kind comments that were made tonight about our standards. But
I feel like we need to vote on whether or not to ship you a fruit basket or not. All right. Thanks for hosting. Thanks for attending. Thanks for participating, and good luck with your development.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, everybody.